Huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Ruben Olson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues, Campfire Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we're going to be going back into the Orbs a little bit here and just going to share a little bit more information and talk about some more encounters that have taken place with these things. But before we get to that, a couple of plugs. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca is our website with our blog access. You can also find us on our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, as well as our Patreon, where you can get ad-free, exclusive early episodes. Again, March was our biggest month, and we just can't thank you guys enough for being there and supporting the show and helping us get to this point so far. And so we've revised our Patreon tiers a little bit and added a couple bit more incentives in there and some rewards and perks. So definitely worth checking that out if you have the time. Aside from that, you can send us an email. If you want to just say hi, see how things are going, any questions, cryptidclues@gmail.com. But without further ado, let's get into it. So I did an episode not too long ago that's diving into the orbs and kind of a comparison a little bit into history with them and what they could be. So I thought, let's take the time to kind of go back into that area and explore this. So with these orbs, they're often seen in a variety of colors. We have white to silverish in color. We have pink, red, orange, yellow, gold, green, blue, purple, and even a brownish to black as well. Now, the meaning behind this, there is a lot of spiritualistic belief that some of these are, again, spirits of loved ones. And when you see one of a specific color, it has a reference to maybe a certain part of your life, like I guess you could attribute it to almost like horoscopes, essentially. But again, that is one piece of the puzzle that people believe in. So are these orbs spirits of loved ones? Are they small piloted devices? Or are they simply the result of a natural occurrence via gas or lightning? For sure, some of these can actually obviously be attributed to the latter, but you can't dismiss the eerie way in which these orbs can sometimes maneuver, usually idling to themselves above water, trees, or even right inside people's houses. And sometimes until they're given attention and you maybe approach them or make it blatantly obvious that you are fixated on it, kind of like a bug or a fly or a moth going to a moth lamp, essentially. So once that happens, the orbs then they begin to kick it. They get honed in on you almost. And so what I mean by that is when you're out in the woods, people say they found a ball of light out there, and until they displayed interest in it, then these things would start to follow them. And it's also worth noting how they do maneuver, which is quite something as well. Again, it's attributed to the topic of these orbs being piloted by some sort of intelligence. The movement hardly seems random, but indeed it does seem as though something is connected to it, and how that extends outward to the viewer. So most people that witness orbs, they tend to experience an emotion, maybe apprehension, or sometimes even peace. It's varied from person to person, and we all know that we're all made of energy, and if these orbs emanate such an energy, then it makes sense why we would feel a reaction in our response. But if not, I could very well easily attribute it to a flight or fight response in dealing with something that is real and completely unknown to our own perception. So Of course, there are many legends associated with balls of light, as in fairies and mystical beings, but some of those tales can have a negative ending to them as well. It's not always positive, not always like, okay, I could feel my loved ones close as they were trying to connect to me with being, they were an orb. There's also the luring adventurers off the marked trails and forever getting lost in the woods, which again, it's a big no-no, but those are things that are attributed to these balls of light. Now, I've seen a few videos of orbs, and Ruben's even had some manner of orb activity in his former place of residence. But these balls of light, they also coincidentally seem to appear when individuals experience Bigfoot and Dogman. And again, this is kind of like a can of worms where I think, in my personal opinion, when you have one experience, you open up the jar. The cookies are falling out of the cookie jar. So it's not exclusive either to that one particular setting and creature, cryptid, whatever you want to call it. If you see a Bigfoot, I think, okay, there's probably a high chance you're going to see another one. You're going to start seeing orbs. You're going to start seeing maybe a dogman. And you're probably going to start seeing aliens. It's the weirdest thing, but this is just something that kind of goes hand in hand with a lot more people that I'm speaking with. It's incredible. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where there's individuals that just, maybe it's because of how they think and how I'm not stating how, if I know how people think, but people have closed their minds off to these things. And that is such a widespread collective conscious mindset, basically, of people that just cut themselves off from the outside world, essentially, and ignore all of these things. And when you have a large portion of the population that does that, they're not going to experience these things. You can't just go out 10 minutes into the woods off the beaten path here and just think, oh, I'm going to see some orbs. I think there needs to be some kind of willingness to receive and acceptance that you're not in Kansas anymore. This is the real deal. Nature owns you. You can't go in thinking you're a tourist. You got to go in thinking like, okay, I'm going to be a resident here and just kind of reside and accept your surroundings. Like, maybe I'm getting a little too spiritual and a little preachy with how that sounds, but I just seem to feel, and from what I've explored with talking to so many different people, it's sometimes complete fluke. By all means, they wake up and then boom, it's right in their window. And then there's other times where it does happen to these people that have there's a certain kind of je ne sais quoi about the way they think or the way they receive it. And lots of people get terrified of these things. But I think most people and how they react to these things all kind of share similar attributes, you could say. Whereas other people that haven't experienced these things and just go to work their 9 to 5 and so forth, I don't know, they probably would just implode. I don't know. But all in all, as I'm saying, there's probably a clear line that's kind of going down the middle here between different people and how they reciprocate these things, how they interpret these things, how they receive these experiences. And once they experience that first one, without even knowing that they are on this side of the spectrum, then it is like an activation. They're flicking a switch and these things are just drawn and they consistently start happening. So that hopefully that makes some kind of sense. That's just kind of one of my miscellaneous thoughts that I can attribute to this. So again, with the balls of light being connected with Bigfoot and Dogman, that is something that myself and Ruben will be looking into heavily come, a future episode, because there's so much more to explore there. And I keep talking to people that see one of these things and then balls of light appear. It's fascinating. So definitely stay tuned for the future because we'll be getting much more in depth with that. However, when it comes to cataloging these balls of light, it always seems like the people that experience these things firsthand have the best cases to make, particularly in group settings. So I'm talking like you are actually there and you see it with your own eyes as opposed to filming it or with a camera. The reason I say that It's because if you use a camera, most people, I feel like, will attribute it to being a smudge on the lens or dust floating around out of focus in the background with, a lens flare effect, so to speak, the light of the moon or something, or someone's flashlight hitting some of these sparkles of dust that are floating around. And then when you look at that photo, it looks like floating light orbs. Again, maybe you can't really attribute that to necessarily photographs of all the colored orbs if you get crystal clear footage of something like that. But it basically allows for people to dismiss it as evidence when sometimes the photo could be completely evident in what you saw. It's between a rock and a hard place kind of scenario, unfortunately, and it's really, really upsetting. There was a movie that I didn't watch, I watched, not too long ago, so I'm trying to say. I watched it with my wife, and it was Brave, and I love Pixar, I love Disney movies, but I never got around to watching Brave, not until when my wife put it on, and we were watching it, and I thought, oh my goodness, I love what's going on in this setting, because we have orbs that are luring our main character, I believe her name was Merida, off the track and off the trail, and it was just cool to see that kind of representation in here, and yeah, I just thought it was a fun kind of association just to throw in. But aside from all that, I'm going to jump to a quick ad break, and we're going to get into some encounters with these orbs. So we'll be right back. And we're back. So again, if you want to hear more in-depth coverage about the orbs, you can go check out one of my previous episodes I did. I can't remember the name of it, but it is on our feeds nonetheless. So without further ado, let's get into some encounters here. So, and I quote, "About 10 years ago, my father and I seen a white orb across a field on a property. There was snow on the ground, and the air was very cold and still. It was coming on dusk, and there was a ridge on which the orb followed, going uphill. It traveled between trees, and at first I thought it was someone with a flashlight. The next morning, I checked the area, and there were no footprints. Before meeting up with my father that morning, my father saw the orb going alongside of his property by the road, and there wasn't any footprints or any sign of human activity. We don't know what the phenomena was." And that's very, very interesting. And again, that is a far out on a property, farmland kind of it sounds like. So very interesting, especially the way it was traveling and zigzagging between trees as well. And again, this goes hand in hand with the way it's maneuvering. So a white orb the size of a basketball came into my dark bedroom from my door, and I watched it slowly travel across my room in a straight line and go through the wall below the window. I was shocked to see this. It's like it was just strolling through my room casually. I blinked about 10 times to make sure I wasn't seeing things. It was crazy. Again, this is a very interesting thing because the size. Now, the sizes of these things, they range. I have seen people specify that they could be like the size of a grapefruit, maybe a little bit smaller, but they can hit up to basketball size and a little bit bigger. So again, it varies on, would it be depth perception, I guess, like how far away you are from these things, and try to scale up how large they are. Again, in this setting, in the bedroom, this thing is obviously really, really close. So when you say it's the size of a basketball, that's significantly large, especially for being a glowing beacon of light. 15 years ago, I woke up with an orb inches above my face. The entire orb was about the size of a soccer ball. I was too terrified to move, so I watched it for a long time. It was made of multiple smaller green and blue orbs that moved in sequence, forming 3 nested wheels. The smaller orbs had symbols on them that I could barely see because the orbs were moving so fast. Have you heard of anyone else seeing the inner workings of an orb? And this is fascinating because I have heard of people talking about seeing the insides of an orb, and some people have said, and this is again, I think I heard some of this mentioned in Sasquatch Chronicles when they were talking about it. Definitely go check out Sasquatch Chronicles. But even on other shows and other encounters too that I've read online, people have talked and spoken to seeing sometimes like a face, sometimes seeing like a little figure inside these light balls. So when you see someone that mentions the inner workings, I think that there is a whole area that you can dive into and connect with other people and that have had similar experiences like that. Because maybe it isn't just a ball of light, maybe it is something that is legitimately controlled. Just outside National Forest in Lake County, I was burning up some of the quarts of firewood accumulated from storm damage to my property. I saw a triangle of lights head northward above the tree line to the east of me. The lights circled back after several minutes and were joined by others. The lights then appeared to begin to chase each other. These lights made no sound whatsoever. Now this is kind of getting into more like we're dealing with aliens here, but I still attribute this to being associated with the orbs because they're chasing each other. I mean, for all we know, we don't know anything about UFOs. I mean, UFOs could be just playing a game of tag up in the sky. Why not? But I do think that this is just one of those things where orbs are just fixated on each other and they're just maneuvering around. Again, the triangle of lights is definitely something that is associated with UFOs. That was definitely the shape of my UFO encounter as well, I believe. If I remember correctly, it was definitely 3 distinct points based on seeing the lights, at least. What have we got here? We got a couple more. My wife and I went to Moose Lake in July, and we stayed at the campsite on the lower right side of the lake. After reading the post, understanding lights seen not only by him but others, we had just finished a late dinner on our second night here. It rained pretty much all day, and it all died down by 6 or so. We went out fishing for around 20 to 30 minutes and came back and started a fire. I, who am an avid alien believer, was at the hole in the ground, aka the crapper, away from the lake in the deep woods. I came back and my wife was staring across the lake in the pitch black in front of the fire pit with no lights. I ran up and asked what she was doing. Then I saw 2 lights as bright as 10 million candle-powered lights hovering above the trees across the lake. It's about 10 o'clock at night when this is happening. Not too sure what time actually. It was we had no watch, but no sound in the middle of this pristine forest, given across the lake and all, but planes make noise. We have no idea what it was. So again, this is kind of leading into what it could be more alien-like, but I think it had to be mentioned because where's the line stopping between these two things? A group of 8 of us, that included my 3 brothers and my dad, were on our way to Mackenzie Bay off Quinipi to base camp for a week. We were coming in via Agnes Lake. And on day 2, we were traveling into Bird Lake in early afternoon when we saw a bright burning light about the size of a football in the air, about 6 feet. And down the Portage Trail, approximately 100 feet away, so it was burning like a sparkler you waved around as a kid on 4th of July, and everyone saw it. We put on our packs and canoes and proceeded on portage to Anubis Lake. Well, the burning light ball went right down the path with us, but would never let us get within more than 100 to 150 feet of it. It was nuts. We all thought that what we were seeing was an optical illusion of some sort. And when we reached the end of the portage, the light just stayed out on the lake. We all turned around and proceeded to get the rest of our gear as we double portage, and the burning light followed us right back to where we landed. And it stayed in front of us again all the way to where we left our canoes at the end of the portage. So again, this is where I kind of was not hinting, but talking about how these things will follow people when there's a little bit of interest shown. And it didn't let them get within this set amount of proximity from it. Whether that's because it has some sort of intelligence, I cannot speak to, but it definitely is an indicator of such intelligence to know that these people need to stay 100 to 150 feet away. They can't come any closer because maybe they might be able to see the internal components to what it looks like. I mean, it's just one of those things. So this is also prime because you're dealing with a group of 8 people that all can collaborate and coincide with each other's stories that, hey, we all saw something. And it wasn't one person out there alone taking a photo with the camera of what they genuinely did see. But we're dealing with a group of people. And this is, again, I've told Ruben this many times. You're seeing a Bigfoot, you're seeing something you don't know out there, and you have at least one other person with you to corroborate with what you saw, and their eyes saw it too. Hopefully they will, they won't bury it down deep and forget about it, but hopefully they will reaffirm you like, hey, we saw that together. Like, this is a real thing. And again, that is powerful. That, to me, that is a good dose of evidence. So if I was out in the woods and I saw something with Ruben, like, we would be nonstop talking about it. So it's important to talk about these things and to, not just bury them deep, but that'll weigh you down, and it'll put a lot more on your shoulders. And I'm not saying you need to go on the news or anything like that, because when you experience a ball of light, how do you talk about that with someone? That's incredibly difficult. So whether it be a family member or a good close friend, it might really help alleviate and just go from there and see what happens. Again, I'm not saying open up fully, because sometimes if you open up fully, you'll receive a lot more in return. So it all depends on how much you want to reciprocate it, I guess, is all I'm saying. So that's all I got for today. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Cryptid Clues, and I'm excited to come back next week because me and Ruben, we got some big plans for the show. We got some great topics we're going to be diving into, and I've been talking to a whole bunch of really awesome people out there in the community, and it's fascinating, everything that's being talked about and discussed right now. So yeah, for any more content though, definitely check out our previous episodes. Like I was mentioning, we did one on the Orbs, and our earlier episode for this week, me and Ruben dive into the Dogman a little bit more of a deep dive, kind of creating a hypothetical bridge between existing wolves and dogs and allowing us to paint a hypothetical picture of a Dogman, basically. So definitely it was a good episode full of discussion. But until next time, I'm Taylor. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Cryptid Clues, and we'll see you soon. Stay safe, everybody.